I said, I want to document everything I do online so it burns them in the depths of their souls when they see me succeed. When you start getting hate mail and email and complaints, right? Like I've had people go as far as sending hate mail to my active clients that we have listed.
Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. We have with us a very powerful human. He's a real estate entrepreneur, real estate team owner, been in the game for a while, has lots of attention online. Mr. Brian Casella, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us, brother.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Let's chat.
Yeah.
I brought my fancy pink headphones, so I'm ready to go.
I know that, brother. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about you. And one of the things I want to dive into is kind of this evolution of you showing up, fully and completely in terms of what's true for you. So, I always like to bring people to the platform that I think can add a lot of value, and you definitely fit that description. And one of the things that I really respect and appreciate about you is that very early on, you recognized platforms. So meaning like this idea of attention and using these highways, because I see like YouTube is a highway, it's like a road, and TikTok is a highway, it's a road, Instagram is a highway and a road. And you recognize that by getting traffic to that road, you can then point it in a specific direction and monetize it in some way, whether it be helping clients buy and sell real estate, or, you commoditize it as far as like training and coaching or people partnering with you and whatever organization that you're with at the time. So talk a little bit about when you noticed that was a thing and why you embraced it so quickly, when I see a lot of agents who still in 2022 are like, I don't do like the attention thing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting story is, and as we can say, as immature as this sounds, like most people, when they, do real estate or anything entrepreneurial or anything that we can say deviates from the traditional path of what people do, right? I had a lot of naysayers. And originally I said, I want to document everything I do online so it burns them in the depths of their souls when they see me succeed, because these people have been so outspoken against me and what I want to do. Right? It's almost like a chip on your shoulder, right? Which I think can't be the only motivation you have, but if you have it, it can be a very powerful one, right? So that's initially how it started. But secondly, I'm the type where I want to talk. I don't want to text. This is why I hate when people have an Android. I want to send a voice message iPhone to iPhone, right? I started shooting videos and sending them to clients instead of texting them, right? Because sometimes I couldn't get a hold of them on the phone. And very quickly I noticed, man, every time I send a video, I get a response. Like it never goes unnoticed and unresponded, right? It's always acknowledged. They always say, oh, that's cool. Some sort of response is given. Versus if I text or I call, sometimes I don't. And then I realized, and I started deducing, I was like, man, video has a particular effect. Right? And call it, if we're going to name it anything, the TV effect, where you would see the news guy on Channel 5 News at 8 p.m., right? Everybody would be sitting around the TV, and whatever he says is what's happening, and whatever he says must be true. And he's the authority figure. He's the clean cut guy on TV. There's just something magical about him. He has this aura to him. And if you saw him in public, you would freeze and be like, oh my God, that's the news guy, right? I started seeing that TV effect with video very early on. And I said, this is it. So I said, I can, document to prove people wrong, but there's something to this thing, right? Also, as a bonus, I noticed, hey, internally, when you make video, you equate it psychologically to like public speaking, where it scares you. So by doing it, you develop your communication skills, your presentation skills, and you develop your overall, game when it comes to skills, right? You have the skills pay the bill shirt, right? Skills. So, and as I started doing it, of course, people are like, oh, it's a waste of time. It's a fad. But I saw that early on. So where we're at now with video, I started having those visions early on when when all those light bulbs went off, like clients respond to it. It helps your skills, and this is before I even realized the whole following thing. This was just from like a business standpoint and a development standpoint. I said, this is genius. I need to get on it, and I need to get on it hard. And that's all I started doing.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm taking notes as we're speaking, and I love kind of the evolution. So at first it was like, all right, for all you haters that are telling me this shit doesn't work, I'm going to show you that it works and kind of like, push it in your face that it's working. That's how it started. And then you started to just simply observe and pay attention, and you recognize like how it creates this faux fame or like this faux celebrity where it's like,
Yep.
oh, when people see me in the digital world, a couple things happen. Is one is they feel like they know me already. And then two, they're kind of like, whoa, like this is so interesting. And I'm sure this happens to you regularly. Like I was out doing a talk and somebody ran up on me and they're like, oh my God, it's like seeing a celebrity, right? So you noticed that, a while ago before everybody else noticed it. You also noticed that the response rates, the kind of how people are responding to video or short form video before even TikTok or before Reels or anything like that. You're like, oh, like this is like a thing. And there was no kind of argument, right? Because from direct experience, you can see, taste, touch, and smell like, yeah, this is real, right? This isn't theory. This isn't like, in my mind, I think this makes sense. It's like, nope, this is tangible, practical. Like I get it. And then you also recognize that it would help you to develop the skill of presenting, because I'm aware that presenting one to many is one thing, one to many on a Zoom call, one to many in a physical setting, in the physical world, one to one, right? That by really diving into video, it would cause you to get more comfortable and, ultimately that skill to elevate. So once you realize that, were there some of these roads or platforms that you developed, like that you spent time and energy on first? Like, did you have any guidance as far as that can concern? Was it all just like trial and error? Like, what was the evolution of that?
I would say mostly trial and error, because I knew the big three at that time were Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, right? And I just said, you know what? I want to be omnipresent. I'm going to be on all of them. And the key with me in the beginning was consistency, because it wasn't probably until year 3 and 4 of posting consistently that it finally clicked in my mind to really start strategizing, creating like a content schedule and taking it to that level. In the first couple of years, it was just put it out, document what you're doing, be online, be present. And that's really where it was. And my just grit and discipline is what fed that. So I was posting on YouTube once or twice a week. I was on Instagram like every day, posting a picture or a video. Like I was always posting stuff. And what really, I think, guided that ship, if that's what we're going to call it, was people's responses. Potential customers typing, I love this. Other agents like, wow, this is incredible. People who grew up around me and knew me are like, man, like what you're doing is cool. Every time I open up any app, I see you. I go to YouTube, I see you. I go to Facebook, I see you. It's cool to see that you're hustling and you're doing your thing. And it was really that reciprocation that I was getting from the public, requests for help, and stuff like that, that really I was like, man, like this is a monster that people still don't understand. And then from there is where I started evolving and like volunteering to go speak, right? And really start to enter that world of becoming like a performer, a speaker, a teacher, a trainer. And I started volunteering, and I ended up doing about 100 free talks, whether I went to boards of realtors, car dealerships, high schools, universities. I just started volunteering and offering to speak. And by the 50th, 60th, 70th speech, now I'm getting in a rhythm. I'm getting better at it, right? And it's just like this whole new thing, because I realized, man, like the whole teaching and training aspect is fun, because I'm gathering so much experience, making calls, knocking on doors, and interacting with people. I have a particular perspective on this thing that very few people have, because I've put in so many reps. I can literally, it's almost like Neo in the Matrix. Like you already know what's going to happen before it does. Like I'm at a presentation now, before people open their mouth, I already know what they're going to say, because I've done this so many times.
There's still a very disproportionately large portion of the population who still doesn't see it. or they actually recognize it's kind of important, but they're not really clear on like how to do it or like that sort of thing. And I'm aware like a lot of insecurity about getting in front of a camera, things of that nature. So would the advice be now be on all of those platforms? Would the advice be to choose one platform and dominate? Like what would you propose or suggest for people who recognize this is a thing and to get into it?
Well, I think now it's a little simpler in the respect that, like, as an example, if I shoot a video on this phone, this is 4K top notch quality. When I started, we had an iPhone, 6? And you couldn't really do much. Like Instagram didn't have video. You could only post a picture. There was no stories. Like the game is way different and more evolved now to where I can shoot one video on my phone for 2 minutes and I can repurpose that content for a week on different platforms. If I am going to recommend anybody focus on one, it would be YouTube, because YouTube is the most integrated into Google. And whenever you search stuff on Google, that's like 99% of the platform that people use to search and look. You want to be on it, because if you type anything, like long hair, right? What's going to pop up? A video. The first 2 results are always going to be videos. So if you're on YouTube, that's the place to be.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, in regards to the strategy behind it, well, yeah, I'm going to, of course, advise somebody now to have strategy, because that's going to make it a little simpler. You know, I think it took me 2 years to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And it didn't start really blowing up, even though I had like great recognition. People recognized me. The following I had was like very intense and close. It didn't really start exploding until I added other things like collaboration, really opening up to my audience outside of just a traditional, like, hey, this is what I do in a day. I'm a realtor, right? Like I remember the first time I really blew up was when I started opening up to people that at the time I was like, hey, I'm a huge car guy. I love cars, right? I'm a big Fast and the Furious fan. I've bought a couple cars. These are the, like, you know, my goal is to get a Lamborghini in a couple years, and I'm close. I want to get this. And then I started talking to people that were in my vicinity who were YouTubers, who were car guys. And I said, hey, man, I know you like this car. I have it. Let's shoot a video, right? First video I do like that with a guy, boom. I go from 1,000 to like 6,000 subscribers overnight because we collabed.
And that's what you're talking about as far as collaboration, where you're exposing yourself to other people's audiences, and they'll take some of your audience, you'll take some of theirs. But in doing so, it has a magnifying effect. So there's only so much I can do kind of on my own, right? Just kind of, you know, doing what I'm doing. And that's a very intentional and purposeful strategy for acquiring more attention. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. And I was really key about it, because I think the mistake that people make there is they just start looking at the numbers. Oh, this guy has 1 million followers. Let me collab with him. My thing was, I don't necessarily care about that. I want to collab with people that if social media wasn't involved, maybe we would hang out. Maybe we have some of the same core values. Like let that be a bonus that they have a following, not the only thing. And I think that's where people make mistakes, is you get caught up in the metrics. What gets me the most views and likes and comments?
I think it's super cool. So not just kind of focused on what am I going to get from this, but also having it be authentic. And the second thing you shared was authenticity, and this idea of letting people in and see you. So we talked off camera. There's definitely been like this evolution, right? So if people, which is normal and natural if people are growing, and if people were to see your original content and the way you were dressed and how you were presenting and the way that you present now, it's different.
Yeah.
So like I see a lot of agents in the coaching and training that we do that very much so, to your point, constrict themselves. It's like one-dimensional videos like, hey, I'm here at my house on 1265 Banana Street. Like, and it's all the same, right? So talk a little bit about how that kind of unlock for you, because I think it was a very big unlock and led to a huge kind of growth spurt.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, right? The first one is, I think that naturally occurs as you develop as a person, because like the person who's stuck, right? And hi, I'm on 156 Banana Street. That's not how they are. They're conforming to the pressure of outside standards and opinions, and I see it as like this scale that eventually tips. You have the world view, their standards, their opinions, their judgments on this side, and then you have your own personal development on the right side. And as you develop and get better, and that scale starts to tip, that's when you start hitting that zone of, okay, I'm going to express me. I'm going to do it my way. I have no problem, expressing my individuality, even if it might not click with certain people. But hey, this is me, right? But you have to really get to know yourself better and step into your confidence more. And I think that's something that you work on off camera, but being on social media can help you with it, because it kind of puts your feet to the fire. How are you going to respond when you get your first negative comment, right? When you start getting hate mail and email and complaints, right? Like, I've had people go as far as sending hate mail to my active clients that we have listed.
And I thought what you said there is pretty insightful. This idea, like they create this like online avatar, which is like this version that they think that the world wants to see from them, that never makes a mistake, that's always on point, and like sells all these homes. When in fact, according to the Association of Realtors, at a 1 point, I think it's 6 million agents, 1.3 million through January only sold 4 homes in the first 6 months of 2022.
Yep.
So it's like, that's not really true. But if I look online, it looks like, oh, everybody's balling and like, this is fantastic, right? So, and how that creates this internal duality. And because of that, I'm not in alignment. And I feel like when you're not in alignment, like there's something very much so energetically where you're not like vibrating at a certain frequency because you're not in alignment. And what's interesting is when we see characters in movies, even if they're like despicable, the characters that are authentically themselves, you're always like, you know what? I kind of like that guy. He's a terrible guy, but I like that guy because he or she is unapologetically who they are.
Right.
With no hesitation or reservations. I'm aware, though, that actually requires courage, though, to allow people to really see you. So were there points where you were like, I don't know, like where you shot it and you're like, I'm going to send this, but like, I don't know, maybe? Or once you made that decision, was it just like, all right, cool, let's rock?
I think for everybody, that's going to be a different roadblock at different levels. Like, as an example, for some people, it could be a particular status that they write on Facebook, right? And I would use that as a teaching point for people. Find that edge and push it, because that's what allows you to expand, I can say, like your mental empire to a boundless just zone where there's no limits, because that has carryover into every area of life. And if you hesitate here on a Facebook post, where else are you going to hesitate? Because that's going to carry over somewhere else. You're going to hesitate when a client says something to you, right? Like a common scenario that I deal with a lot with people is, when a client kind of oversteps her boundaries and maybe disrespects them or their team. I'm like, well, what do? You don't just let people walk all over you, right? So if you don't have the courage to post something on Facebook, how are you going to tell somebody something when, in the heat of the moment? In a way, when you kind of hit that point, a lot of people make the error of going a little bit too far, where you just like, you become this renegade, like, screw everybody and this and that. So you might go a little bit too much, but it's like if an animal breaks out of a cage, it's going to have its moment of extra aggressiveness. Then it'll come down and get back to its equilibrium. Let's just say on that avenue, because of afraid of criticism or judgment, you will limit yourself. That if you didn't have that, you would get much farther along. You would have more peace of mind, fulfillment, all those other blanks that people are looking for, right? You cannot unlock that unless you pass that segue. And for everybody, it's a different point. For me, it was like 2 little breaking points, one realization, one public, explosion, we can say.
Yeah.
But if you're not willing to go through that, you will always be a notch below. And there's certain notches like that you have to go through to have those realizations to finally be like, okay, I'm free. And when you are, it's cool, because it's not just business. It's personal fulfillment and freedom in life, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and you walk around and interact with the world differently. And it's something you have to go through to stand on this side and say, oh, I get it,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. There's some nuggets in that. So I was writing stuff down. The first one is like this idea of like a collective hallucination. And, as you started to have this like awareness, like you noticed it. It's kind of like noticing the Matrix for the first time. Like you saw the blue, like the little rabbit, whatever that is, the white rabbit. And you're like, and then you said something about it, which, most people in that room were probably thinking something similar, but you were unattached to the outcome and you were unattached to anything that could come back. And then the other thing you said, which I think is interesting, is like this unwillingness to take heat. I find it so fascinating. I mean, this was my experience too. Like when the first time you get a negative review, like people, dude, like they lose sleep over that shit. Like it freaks people out because like we're conditioned to try to want to make everybody happy and everybody like us. And I'm just aware if Jesus was to pop on this call with us, somebody wouldn't like his hair, somebody wouldn't like the color of his skin, somebody wouldn't like what he was talking about. Like as your audience expands, it's impossible to make everybody happy. So, you know, when we're in an environment and school environments and things of that nature that prompt us to sit, don't make noise, like don't make a fuss, and really stamp out this willingness to stand out, then you have people that are like kind of, they have like these invisible shackles that are holding them, like restricting them from being able to show up fully and completely and express what's true for them, whatever that is. Right now, we are in an environment where sometimes, which you've experienced, you say some things where platforms or industries or things of that nature, they may not like it. And they have some interesting powers as far as platforms and giving people, because they control distribution. So they can control if my message gets out there. You know, at the same time, the more that I'm kind of playing with this attention and like noticing the results of it, I do believe what that futurist said is that social capital will be more valuable than actual capital. And what it makes me think about is like, you know, I had the good fortune, Grant Cardone asked me to go on his helicopter. And when I did just one picture with him, just one, like 25,000 people like end up watching, and you get like 500 subscribers, like something crazy. And that all that is social capital. Right. So anything now, he's such a bright sun that anything gets in proximity to the sun gets lit up. And the closer you get to the sun, it's going to turn into fire. Like it's going to turn into its own sun. Right. One last question before I let you go, because I know your time is valuable. So we've talked about your journey. We've talked about philosophically, like why this stuff is super important, and also practically how attention is actually a lever. It's leverage. And it's a third form of leverage that's been now kind of available to us because of the internet. The first is labor. The second is capital. The third is attention. And attention works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without borders or boundaries or restrictions. So it's actually more powerful than the other form of leverage, the other two forms. So, and then we talked about how, okay, probably pick one platform, hammer on it, right? That'll help you to grow the others. And we talked about being willing to kind of take the heat, putting yourself out there, and what's going to be required internally to be able to do that. So what would you suggest the cadence should be for agents out there who are like, okay, I get all this, I want to do it. So if they pick a platform, like what's the cadence? How many times should they be posting? Should they be doing short form video? I know the answer to that. Should they, like, what should they be doing to really get this thing off the ground?
Well, you know, one thing I tell people now is, the big thing right now is like the reels, and the algorithm will push stuff like that. So if you have something that is new or being favored by the algorithm, ride that wave. For the people who are new, and I'm finding this because apparently me being consistent is like this 1 in a million thing that I'm naive enough to believe that everybody should be this way.
Yeah.
I tell people, look, you know, I can prescribe to you whatever, but if you're not going to follow what I say or anybody gives you in regards to the structure because you can't or you refuse to, start with what you can do, right? If you're consistent once or twice a week or inconsistent posting every day, I'd rather have the consistent weekly or twice a week post versus the inconsistent daily one, right? Because we need to build momentum here. So I don't know if there's a perfect cadence for people. I can give you the secret sauce formula, but if you don't follow it, it doesn't matter. You know, so I would tell people what you schedule and what you commit to, do that. And if once or twice a week is what you can do in regards to, you know, long form or short form posts, then start with that, because over time you'll build this momentum. The issue is people still see this social media that we're discussing as like not as a staple in their business. They see it as like this fantasy Disneyland, like, oh, that's for the celebrities. Oh, that's for the special people who already have an audience. That's for the $1 million listing guys or the social media guys. Like, I don't need to do it. When people forget that the moment they meet you and they're like, oh, Brian seemed like a nice realtor, what are they going to do? They're going to look me up on Google or Instagram me. And if they see I have a profile with no picture and I haven't posted in 2 years, what do you think they're going to believe? Oh, this guy's not even in the business. But if they look me up
Yeah.
on Facebook or Instagram and they see that I'm posting, 2 or 3 times a week, and I've been doing videos and I have property tours, at least now my online resume, which is what I call it, checks out. And they're like, okay, I would rather somebody go on my profile and disagree with something I said and have a negative reaction than not see who I am and not even know that I exist.
Yeah, I
Like
agree.
I would prefer that. And like you brought up haters earlier, I just tell people haters are confused fans. That's all they are. Because they love you. They're just giving you the wrong emotion, right? They're giving you a negative emotion.
Yeah, and it has more to do with them than it does you, because obviously they're projecting onto you something that's going on with them internally. And like I've shared with people, it's like, gosh, man, if I walk in a room and everybody knows who I am, is that helpful to me in some way? It's like, yeah, it's 1,000% helpful to me without me having to introduce myself. And to your point, I was listening recently. I don't know if you know, but Mr. Beast was offered like $1 billion for all of his stuff recently, and he turned it down.
Really?
And
Wow.
and when you look at, I was listening to this guy, and he was saying that in the future, like commodities, like companies like Kellogg's, like, these companies that sell commodities to consumers, like cereal or deodorant or Gatorade or like whatever, if they don't have a content division of what they do, they are going to die.
Yep.
And what he said is, we are living through a time where individuals with attention, Mr. Beast being one, where he has, one of the top YouTube people in the world as far as followers. And he created a burger business, again, selling burgers to just average folks. He has 1,000 locations. It's $100 million business. Wow. And then he created a chocolate bar recently, and he dropped it. It's the best chocolate bar in the country now. You look at you look at the Logan guys with the Prime, the Gatorade thing. You look at Will Smith's son, Just Water.
Yeah,
it's like a bottled water company. Again, 100 million plus revenue.
Yeah.
You look at Kylie Jenner. Took attention, connected it with a good that's sold to consumers, cosmetics, and she became a billionaire. Yep. So what they were saying is that moving forward, we are living through this transition where if huge, large corporations do not have a content division in what they're doing, their business is going to get eaten up by people who primarily do content.
100%.
And that's unbelievable, right? And in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So if you can see something that other people can't see, you can go aggressively in that direction. You clearly saw it a while ago, 7 years ago. And I think that's awesome, and you benefited from it. So listen, brother, this has been like a super enjoyable conversation. It has been an enjoyable use of my non-refundable precious breaths. I hope it has been for you as well. Like, again, in terms of like collabing, I feel like I would, I could talk to you for hours, and we hang out outside of this. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know your time is valuable. So if people want to connect with you, if they want to find you in some way, like, where should they go?
Instagram or YouTube is probably the best way. If you want to reach me personally, I would say Instagram, if you can find me. Same thing with YouTube, right? Like I'm pretty active on YouTube, but personal, I would say my Instagram, because just like you see my name, I made all my handles and all my profiles the same. So it's easy to find me.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So listen, I appreciate you, brother, and look forward to reconnecting soon.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.